Mechanics. We know a thing or two because we've shot a gun or two. Over the years, more than 20 videos on different Canik models, including a roundup of the models we have, and experiences taking, for example, the Elites to Center T and running them through a rather rigorous pistol course. Love these things for a lot of reasons. Today we're here to talk about the new stuff, the meta, coming up next on GBGuns. So pardon me, as part of a pre-launch package, I don't have the normal box that you get when these come in, but I've got the list and it can show you what all you're getting with it. So the gun, of course, and a reversible inside the waistband, outside the waistband holster. What I got to do is swap these clips around. It's nicely made out of 8/1000 Kydex. A punch tool, more on that in a bit. Of course, your trigger lock, an aluminum anodized, then cerakoted magwell, toolkit. This thing's pretty cool. Your back straps, 18 and 20 round magazines, Metgar magazines, and a speed loader that is very nicely made of thick polymer. This is not one of those cheap plasticky ones that you sometimes get in guns. Pretty cool setup there. The manual, beautifully done, nice large print, breaks down everything pretty well. If you want specs, pause now. And the images are graphic renderings with a little bit of color, but they're pretty clear and highlight the points that need to be highlighted. So the manual, I think, is pretty good. Considering that these come in at such a great price point, having a newbie-friendly manual is something that I think is important. This SFX is going to be, I believe, around $580 for an MSRP, the shorter one around $520. I'm going to clear this up and bring in the old SFX and show you what has changed on the meta. Before getting too much into that, this toolkit, which I mentioned, helps with the optics plates. There are two included with the gun. Yes, that's right, it's optics ready. You notice the end of this is actually a bit driver, and inside the grip here are your bits, screws, and biting washers to be able to install the optic of your choice on this thing. I think that's a pretty cool setup. I like that it's all tucked in here nicely, and that includes the driver. It's a pretty clever deal. Now on to the gun. We of course need to show clear for our YouTube nannies, and since the old SFX will be involved, we'll show that that guy is clear too. This thing was wildly popular as a very affordable way to get into competition. You've got a long sight radius, extra velocity out of that longer barrel, which means you're hitting steel harder, very valuable when you're shooting steel knockdown targets, and it was optics ready. That all has maintained with the meta. Meta, by the way, if you're wondering, is an English verb for dispensing justice or harsh punishment. Kind of a cool name. On the surface, so what you see right away on the outside of the gun as far as what's different, since I know a lot of you are wondering what that is. Well, it starts off with texturing. Notice we have texture here for your memory points rather than just the small blocks and texture there. The texture on the grip itself is slightly more aggressive. It's still not going to rip up your skin, but it does have a little more bite, and on the front we have actual texture instead of this grid. It's a lot grippier, which I think is a great thing. The internals have also slightly changed, more on that in a bit, and the reason why you get that punch is you notice that's not a roll pin, that's a nice divoted guide pin. So when there's aftermarket, so we had a roll pin on the old one, the camera will focus, and that nice divoted pin holding this guy together on the new one. We also have a bit of a flare to the magazine well, and that's just the factory one. Give me some angles so you can see the difference. The included magazine well gives you a big old honking funnel. If you miss that reload, there's something wrong with you. That is a big, nice contoured funnel. You can see it actually feeds all the way in. and this of course screws on when you want to add it, but the only step there is from a larger to a smaller diameter, which is only going to accelerate things. In fact, if we compare it with the magwell that came on the Salient models, it's a better job. The Salient model had a little bit of a step between the polymer and the aluminum, and that could hit at times, and that's right, this is also aluminum, which is nice. Guys who shoot a lot of competitions with polymer magwells have complained that the steel mag chews up the polymer pretty quickly, and then you end up chewing the gun. Since this is so easily installed and replaceable, of course aluminum is softer than steel, but if you ever beat this thing up too bad that you don't like it anymore, you can replace it. But did want to show that it is a bigger flare and adds better guidance than even the Salient model. Something that I noticed on it is it tucks my hand up under the gun. This little extended lip on the front keeps my pinky high, which means as the gun rocks, it's going to serve as a contact point and a friction point for me to be able to keep this gun pretty level. I think I'm probably going to install this for when we do the shooting impressions review. There are more subtle differences that you Canik fanatics will likely pick up on as we go around the gun, but for those new to the guns or new to Canik, I want to get on with our traditional style of review. So the gun is of course clear. We're going to start at the front, and YouTube, this is not pointed at me, it's pointed at a camera that is about 1.5 feet in front of me, pointed down with a monitor screen that I'm looking through pointed back at me. That's why this is weird reach, but it also lets us take a look at the muzzle to see if there's a target crown or not. Looks like there's a slight crowning on there, not very aggressive, but a little bit. This is a 5.2 inch, I'm going to say, barrel. That's going to give you a lot of velocity, and as I mentioned earlier, more energy on target, be that defensive or competitive shooting. We come to underneath the front here, and you can see you've got 3 nice slots for mounting lights or lasers, and they are spaced more evenly, more regularly than the original, meaning you shouldn't have any issues finding the right light or laser to fit and have the switch be where you'd like it. If you're not one of those mounting types, you do have friction on the front of the trigger guard here, some lateral serrations, which is the way they need to be because the gun's going to try to rise. If we look at our trigger, we can see that it is improved a little bit. This is an armed gun. See, the striker's ready, and the safety is not protruding nearly as far as it did on the older model. This one came back pretty flush to a decent break. Reset, short and assertive for another clean break. With this new trigger shoe in there, when the trigger gets to about 90 degrees, about vertical, little creep to our break, and a reset, short and assertive again to another break. This trigger is still very, very nice. I think probably more versatile than the other one, which was a little light and short, a little bit on the competitive side. Maybe too far for some users. This I think is a more well-rounded trigger. If you're concerned about shooting fast, well, that's training, and hopefully we can demonstrate that on the range. Looking underneath the trigger guard, you see this raise here. That did not exist on the older generation. That raise lets your support hand get a little higher up underneath the gun to help you maintain a higher hold altogether, which makes for flatter shooting feeling and a little less muzzle flip. You can see our magazine release is nicely textured, protrudes just a little bit, and is somewhat protected by a raise here. We also have this contour here on both sides that will make for an easier reach for smaller handed folks. With the as comes from the factory backstrap, I reach beyond that square very easily, and I could easily overreach this trigger, meaning that this backstrap is a better fit for someone with smaller hands than I do. But since there are 2 included in addition to the one on here, I bet we can find something that fits me. There's our nice texture on the front. It's of course on both sides, and you can see it's slight depression here that allows a spot for your row of knuckles on the other side, which kind of makes for a slimmer feeling gun. Interesting trick there. Look at our contours. Almost forgot slide to frame fit up front. It is pretty tight. We have a little bit of side to side, a little bit of vertical, slide to frame fit on the back. Very tight side to side, very tight vertical, and of course our barrel lockup is incredibly tight. Coming around the back, we have an indicator of whether or not the striker is armed or not. There's our 3-dot sights. Notice they're nice and large, and we have a ledge here to be able to do one-handed manipulations if you'd like. Did notice on the top of the slide here, a change with the new version from the old is they've done away with the anti-glare serrations, which really once you Cerakote it, you've got a shiny spot anyways. But they've added a loaded chamber indicator up top here that is more akin to what we saw in the newer production Salient versions, and looks a little bit shorter, maybe a touch shorter. The shorter that is, the better. That means the taller it's going to pop up when there's a round in the chamber, which should make it even easier to identify when you've got a loaded chamber. Coming around the right side of the gun, you can see we've got our ambi slide lock release. It works as a lock. It works as a release. A little stiff, but I'm also not super practiced with doing that at this angle, so I'll just take that with a grain of salt. The magazine release is reversible, and from here we'll now take a look inside the gun when we field strip. Field stripping the METE SFX is similar to all of the later model Canics. After showing clear, we're going to release the striker, and you're going to pull down on these takedown tabs on both sides. You can slide back a little bit forward about that far, and then it just comes right off the top. Really easy. Taking a look inside, you can see our construction. Nice large locking block there with a little bit of feed ramp assist. And it's very similar to other prominent guns of this age. A little metal reinforcement for the rails front and rear. Inside of our slide, nice clean machining, and it is actually slightly different than the older SFX. To remove the barrel, we're going to pull out the guide rod. It is a polymer guide rod with a heavy flat coil spring, and on the website you can get springs tuned for other weights if you like to run softer or hotter loads. And here's our nice long barrel. These are mel-nitted, I believe, and a nicely polished feed ramp. Mel-nitted inside and out, which is why it looks so dark in there. From the polish around here, and a little extra polish around the edges to assist in any last minute corrections of rounds. As always, we'll check for our chamber support and chamber fitment using Nosler Match, which is of course the most consistent ammunition that I've ever tested. There's other stuff that comes close, but Nosler has it beat. Drop around in, that's the plunk we wanted to hear, and we can see we've got nice full chamber support all the way around, even underneath. That's important in case you're using reloads, which competition gun, a lot of competitors do. Or if you've got any questionable or old ammunition, corroded brass, things like that. If the brass were to rupture, it sends force where there's not support. So barrels that lack that full chamber support underneath, the brass blows out there. It also allows weaker brass a place to swell, which is where you get the smiley seen on other brass, which means not all of your pressure, the same pressure is building, of course, physics, but with higher volume in there, you're not getting the same push on the bullet that you would with a fully supported chamber. I mentioned that there were some differences between the new and the old. I'm going to take the slide off of the old one and set it side by side so you can see. This is very easy to see because the old is in FTE and the new is in black, but you can see there are some slight differences in how these were machined. Little difference maybe in the safety plunger, but the rest of it remains fairly familiar. The reason why I point out these little differences is so that you can know that this is a redesign, a modernization, if you will, not simply a rebranding of an older product. To put our SFX back together, because of course we did not disassemble, we merely field stripped. YouTube, there is a difference. It's outlined in the manual as I demonstrated in the beginning. We drop our barrel back in and get it locked in place. Put our spring back on its ledge and bring the slide back over top. You want to line up this cutout here with the rails there. Pull to the rear, let it go, it locks back into place. In a quick functions check, trigger works, trigger resets, fires again, we're good to go. So that is the METE SFX. I think when we take it out to the range, we're going to install that magwell, and we'll might play with the backstraps a bit to see which backstrap fits the two of us best. Then we'll of course run our trademark What's for Dinner test, our full mag +1, our spinner test, accuracy test, and give you the shooting impressions, thoughts and reflections from two different shooters. Look for that video coming soon, and don't forget, for more details about this and our experience with the gun, to check out the GBGunsDepot.com. GBGunsDepot.com, no the on that.